Hey guys, my name is Sam. We're here at Westcott Designs, and today we're going to be walking you through the install process of a set of sliders on a 3rd generation Sequoia. So first things first, if you have the steps that come with the TRD Pro, those need to come off. We're going to skip that step because it's a pretty basic process. It's 12mm bolts. You'll see them under there. Just go through, loosen all of those, and they'll pop right out. In terms of difficulty on this install, we'd rate it at probably intermediate. There are some specialized tools that you'll need to get this job done, and maybe a buddy to help you lift the sliders up into place to make it a little easier while you're bolting things in. We'll show you all the tools that you need for this. We'll walk you through it step by step, so let's get going. So for this install, this is one of the specialized tools that you'll need. This is the Riv Nut tool, and this is going to be used to set those bolts into the frame, and you need that leverage and compression there to get those in. Again, this is a little bit more on the intermediate level, but if you plan to do this yourself, you will need to grab one of these tools. All right, so we've got Donnie here helping us out with the rest of this install. On the passenger side of the vehicle, there's a few grommets that need to come out of the frame. We're going to utilize those holes to bolt the sliders in once we get to that step. You'll see them here along the frame. There are 5 of them, correct? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're just using a pry tool here to get underneath those and pop them straight out. And the last one here. There you go, and once those are all out, you can see here along the side of the frame on the passenger side. Now there are also, just on the passenger side, 5 12mm bolts that also need to come out. So we're going to work on those right now, and we'll show you those locations as well. See, these 2 12mm bolts on the bottom side of the frame here need to come out. Set these aside. They will be used again going back through the underside of the slider brackets. So we're towards the rear of the vehicle now on the passenger side. All 3 of these 12mm here that you see in a little triangle need to come out. Again, set these aside. They'll be used again later. All right, so now that we've got all the grommets out of the frame and the 5 12mm bolts, we'll move on to the next step. All right, guys, so after you've popped out the rivets that we showed you, we're gonna move on to the Riv Nuts. And we're gonna show you all these holes here and what needs to be drilled. You're not drilling any new holes, we're using existing holes. Some of them do need to be bored out a little bit to fit these Riv Nuts in. So you can see here we've laid out all 5 of them. In your package there's going to be 5 per side, and the 2 on the outsides, both the front here and this back one here, are a larger diameter. Same thread size, but the Riv Nut is larger. So make sure you have those in the right spot. And then you'll see the holes for the 3 here in the middle. We're going to do those. So here on the frame on the underside, you can see we've got 1 square hole here. You've got a round hole here for one of those, another round hole, and another square hole. So square holes on either ends. Those ones are going to be bored out to an 11/16. So we're going to use a step-up bit for that. We're going to get an 11/16 hole that'll allow us to get in there and install this Riv Nut. So let's go ahead. We're going to open up this first hole to 11/16, and we'll move on to the next step. All right, so we've rounded that hole out now. That's an 11/16. That's gonna allow us to install the larger of the Riv Nuts. We're gonna do the same thing to this hole in the back that's also square. So let's go ahead and bore that out now. All right, so we just finished boring out these holes on the underside of the frame. Those are the larger ones for the Riv Nuts. We're gonna move up to the only other 2 holes that we have to open up, and that's these ones on the passenger side. Same thing on the driver's side. Currently a 7/16. We're gonna use our step-up bit. We're gonna open that up to a 1/2. So let's go ahead and do both of these, and we'll move on to the next step. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and install these Riv Nuts. We've got our Riv Nut tool here. You can find these, they're available on the website, or you can get them on Amazon. And I wanted to just clarify once more, you can see that we're using the larger of the Riv Nuts on these outside holes that we made from square to circle. You can see the height difference here, and we're gonna go in here and squeeze these into place. One thing to make sure of is that as you're compressing your Riv Nut tool, make sure that nut is flush against the frame and pressed all the way up there. It's a weird angle, it takes a lot of force to get that to compress, but you don't want that to compress on the outside of the hole or go in at an angle, because there's not a lot you can do to fix that. All right, so that's the first Riv Nut done. We're gonna do these other 3 in the middle, and we'll do the larger one on the outside, and that will complete the Riv Nuts that we have to install on the bottom. So we just did the large one on the front side. We're gonna move on to these 3 smaller ones here, and then last the other large one on the very rear. Get that into place. Angles are a little weird, just give that all your muscle. They should go in there, and then just thread it back out. Move on to the next. There we go. My workout for the day. All right, so we're installing this last Riv Nut here. This is towards the rear of the vehicle. This is the square hole that we made circle. And again, make sure that Riv Nut is level and just give it a squeeze. These ones are harder. There we go. Unthread this, and we're ready to start bolting up sliders. All right, so you can see here, we just got a floor jack, and we're gonna lay this slider onto it. We've got Eric and Donnie here helping us out. So we're just gonna roll that into position. This makes it really handy to use the floor jack. It's easier than holding it on your lap and trying to push it up into place. This way you can get it in the right spot, and we'll show you exactly which bolt goes where and how they all line up. Make sure you spend the time to just line this up properly. Once you secure those bolts to the bottom, everything else that's going in along the side of the frame should line up. So you want to do this part, make sure you get it right. So you can see we're just kind of hand tightening these into place. We'll go back and secure them, but this will hold it in place so we can slide the floor jack out and put in the rest of the bolts. All right, just showing you this part real quick. We've got the slider in place and we've got it hand threaded into the spots. This is the gas tank skid that we dropped earlier. This should still be hanging free. We're gonna go back in and bolt that up, but just to make sure that that doesn't go underneath the slider, that it's hanging below it after you've installed. So you can see here that we're just hand tightening in those bolts that came out of the gas tank skid, getting those back into place. Once we get everything else installed, we'll go back through and tighten all the hardware. But just so we don't lose those and make sure they're in the right spot, we've got them hand tightened back into their locations. All right, so what we've got here are your blind bolts. We've already hand tightened all of the bolts on the Riv Nuts on the underside of the slider, and we're gonna start with these. These go on the front side of the slider. There's 2 holes that are stacked on top of each other. And you'll notice here on the back of these blind bolts, there's a little dot, and you want that to be facing down. The reason being is when you slide these in, there's a weighted side that will drop down and secure that to the inside of the frame once you've inserted that bolt. So make sure that that little dot is down on the downward side of that before you slide that in, so the weighted portion can drop as soon as you insert it. All right, so you can see your 2 locations here. This is towards the front of the vehicle. The slider should line up with these holes. These are the 2 holes that we bored out from 7/16 to 1/2 inch, and we're gonna go ahead and insert the blind bolts now. With that bottom little dot facing down, insert those in, and that weight will drop, and now you can see this is secured. So from here, that nut is just gonna be tightened down. That spacer will hold up against the frame and lock everything in place. And there you have it. And we're going to do the same thing with the top blind bolt here. Insert that in with the dot facing down, wait for that to drop, and go ahead and tighten that into place. We'll come back with the drill and make sure these are all locked down tight. We'll move on to the next piece of hardware to secure these sliders to the frame. All right, so real quick, just wanted to show you from a wide angle how these bolts look. You can see the Riv Nuts along the bottom. You've got 5 of those in total. We've got those secured into place, which are holding the slider. And then you can also see our blind nuts up there in the front that we just installed. Those are towards the front of the vehicle. We're going to move towards the back of the vehicle now, installing the rest of the hardware. So if you remember, we popped out all those plastic clips. There's one more on the back side that you'll see. It's a rectangular clip that needs to come out. There's one bolt that goes through the entire frame, and that's the whole location that we need to be able to utilize that bolt. So using your pry tool again, you can reach back there, pop that clip out, and then we'll be able to insert this next piece of hardware through the frame. So this long bolt, there's one per side, one on the passenger side, one on the driver's side, and it goes in this hole right up here, and you want to make sure it's facing the same way. So the bolt's going to come from the inside of the vehicle towards the out with the black plate on the back of the frame, and then on the other side you'll have a washer and your nut, and we'll secure that in place. So that's what it'll look like once the long bolt has been inserted through the frame. Remember, black plate on the back with the washer and the nut facing towards the outside of the vehicle. All right, so we're now at the rear of the slider here. We'll show you the exact location. And with these funky little things, you just slide these into the hole like you see here. It wraps around the back, and then you're going to tighten that into place so that it bites up against the inside of the frame and secures the slider to the frame. So this is the set for the very rear of the slider. You're going to see this hole lined up here, and it's the same thing as the one in front of it. You can see both of them in this shot. You're going to slide that into the hole, kind of wiggle it into place there until it falls in, and then go ahead and tighten that up against the frame and the outside of the slider. All right, this is the piece of hardware for the middle of the slider. Same thing as the other two. You're going to slide that in. The black circular plate will butt up against the frame there, and then tighten that into place, pinching everything and securing it to the frame of the vehicle. All right, so this one is the front of the slider. You can see next to our two other holes that we bored out, this one goes into that last spot up there. Not a bad idea to just back the nut all the way to the end of the bolt so that you have the wiggle room to slide that into place. Pop that in, and then we can go through and tighten down everything. So this piece of hardware here is a little bit weird. We're going to show you how to tighten these into place. If you can see here, in the tip of this bolt is actually a hex hole. So we're going to use a number 5 hex head here on our drill and a 15mm wrench to hold that in place. And what you're going to do is actually reverse lefty-loosey the direction of your drill, get that into place, and that will pull the bolt through the nylock nut, securing it to the back of the frame. All right, so we've got every bolt where it needs to go. The last step is to return the hardware that we removed earlier. That's this one hook here. And go ahead and we'll hand thread that for now. Then there's the other 3 bolts towards the rear that we're going to go ahead and put in place. So if you remember, we removed these 3 bolts earlier. We're just returning them to their spots. There's holes pre-cut for them. We're going to tighten this up. We're going to go through all the hardware, tighten everything down, and your slider will be done. It's the exact same on the driver's side, with the exception of these 5 bolts, the 2 we just showed you and the 3 right here. Everything else is the same. It's mirrored on the opposite side. All right, guys, so we've got all the hardware tightened up. You can see the final look here. These are our 20-degree sliders, so they come up at an angle. They hug a little bit tighter to the body of the vehicle. Everything's tightened down. That wraps up the entire install process. If you guys have any questions about this process as you're going through it, feel free to reach out to us. You can find these sliders online at our website at westcottdesigns.net. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you on the next video. Over and out.